Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the 150th episode of the Risk Matrix.
Whoa, baby, 150. Can you believe it? Who would ever thought we would have been at 150?
We got lots to say, James. We got lots
We're
to say.
old.
Well, I mean, that's a whole separate issue, but
Indeed.
150 episode. This is number 150. And again, this is the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and Mr. James Junkin, bringing it to you from our home bases and with the help of Veriforce. So thank you, Veriforce, for sponsoring us thus far and for what you're going to do for us in the future to bring workers home safe from high hazard jobs. James, today, I want to tie this back to our initial episode number 1. You remember what it is?
I do. It's one of my favorite sayings. Paper safety is not real safety.
That's right.
Why do I have to keep saying that to people?
Because people love their paper. They love their programs. They love their policies, but they never make it off of paper. But the way that I thought we could tie it in today is to take something that pretty much lives on paper, doesn't have an engineering control. It basically either works or it doesn't. And we're going to explore some reasons why it works and why it doesn't. I put it on an article on LinkedIn that kind of is a companion to this, and that program is Stop Work Authority. Everybody likes to say it. Everybody likes to put it in their paper, their policies, etc. But what does it actually mean, and how does it actually get implemented in a good way? So before we do that, James, what do you got from Rip from the Headlines?
Rip from the Headlines. Hey, Rip from the Headlines, a big one. Caught my eye. Just came out here in the last few days. H2S release, deadly H2S release, and chemical fire a few days later after this release has led to nearly $800,000 in penalties from OSHA. And who knows what the civil litigation is gonna be. So a Maine pulp manufacturing facility is facing up to almost $800,000 in OSHA penalties after launching an investigation related to an H2S gas release back in January of this year. They were in a shutdown period. These workers were contractor workers. And of course, they were exposed to lethal amounts of hydrogen sulfide that resulted in their death. They did not have adequate respiratory protection. There wasn't adequate alarm systems in place. Of course, there was training there. And so as OSHA was doing the investigation, there's nothing worse. You and I have been through this before, Doc. There's nothing worse than representing a client during an OSHA investigation only for them to have another incident during the investigation process that launches another investigation.
So yeah, we won't name names.
We won't name names to protect the innocent and the guilty, right?
That's right.
During the investigation from the incident in January, they came around again in March at the same facility and had a fire in which approximately 4,400 gallons of hydrogen peroxide came into contact with the wood pulp that had been allowed to collect on the ground, which created a dangerous reactive environment. So OSHA, because of its investigations, have come out with 4 willful citations, 8 serious, almost $800,000 worth of penalties, 2 dead. And when you go back and look at the history of this facility, this place has undergone 13 inspections since 2017 and received 14 previous citations. So I wrote a little article about this called The Contractor Liability Myth, Why H2S Fatalities Expose the Limits of Risk Transfer, to talk about this dynamic of responsibilities between the hiring client or the host facility, for those of you in construction, the host facility and contractors, and how this particular incident, the takeaways ought to be H2S monitoring, alarms, training, verification that your contractors have the appropriate respiratory protection, a robust hazard communication program. There were labeling issues. So anyway, if you're inclined to do so, it's posted over there on LinkedIn, The Contractor Liability Myth, Why H2S Fatalities Expose the Limits of Risk Transfer.
There you have it. Thanks for that Rip from the Headlines, James. So let's talk about Stop Work Authority. And like I said, I kind of tied this back to our original episode, paper safety is not safety. Stop work authority. I don't think I've seen in the last 5 or 10 years a health and safety plan or a site health and safety plan or anything that doesn't have stop work authority in there, or attended a toolbox talks with the client where stop work authority wasn't talked about. So it's there, it's living, but it's living in the words and it's living on the paper. But where does it come to life and why doesn't it come to life? I guess that's what I want to talk about with you today. So, I'll let you start this off. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I usually run into this in a situation as a result of an incident in which we're investigating that incident, or we're following up behind a safety professional that has already done an investigation. And almost every time, companies tend to roll out, well, the worker could have exercised their stop work authority, right? And prevented this from happening. Number one, employees are not required by law to exercise stop work authority.
That's correct.
Okay. So you may have a policy that says that, but in the OSHA investigation, that may or may not hold water, right? But I see that a lot where we're trying to transition the blame and the responsibility away from the organization to the individual employee and said they did not exercise their stop work authority. And mostly what I see is stop work authority exists in a policy and in a training orientation class, new hire induction class. Workers receive instruction on that and that they have the right to stop the job. Sometimes you'll even hear you have the obligation to stop unsafe work. But after that, it's rarely ever talked again until we have the incident and we want to pull this out and pin it on the worker and say, you should exercise your stop work authority.
So I have a theory on that, right? I think a lot of times these programs that say stop work authority or telling people stop work authority, the threshold for stop work is undefined. Okay. So stop work if you feel unsafe. Okay. Feeling, your feeling, my feeling, the collective feeling, like what is that? What is the threshold, right? It's not something that you can hang your hat on, like if there's a suspended load and somebody walks under it, or if there's, there's not a lot of context that's put around it. So each of us individually have to hold what that feeling is going to be, and nobody wants to speak up, right? In case their feeling threshold is lower than other people's, right? Because there are consequences to stopping work. Whether we want to talk about having consequences or not to stopping work, there are consequences, right? There's economic consequences, there's social consequences from your work team.
Let me ask you this: what does stop work mean? Right? So back when I first got into safety and BBS was a big thing and it was being drilled into all of our heads, those interventions, me correcting an at-risk behavior and at-risk situation that you might be doing, was considered part of the stop work, right? I'm exercising my stop work authority to remind you to tie your shoe. Well, I think we need to do a little bit better job in defining that, maybe exclude some of those data points, because if we really want to be proactive and we really want to talk about leading indicators, I need to track this. But no one's going to document, Dr. Martin, would you please tie your shoe? Your shoe's untied and it could be a hazard and you could trip and fall, right? No one's documenting that. So I think we write a lot of policies and stop work's one of them, but I don't know we've ever really defined what the situation is when we do it. To your point, it's based on how I feel, and how I feel may be different than how you feel.
And we've all been in those social situations, James, where nobody wants to be the one that has the lowest threshold for stop work or the lowest threshold for something. We're all looking to each other for those social cues, right? Because we don't want to be the first, or we don't want to be the one that causes the job to shut down. And then, then what happens, right? And that leads me, kind of into a companion thing, right? We have the bystander effect, right? There's a famous case, the Kitty Genovese in New York City, right? She was attacked in the street. All the neighbors saw, they looked out their windows, they saw her getting attacked, and they thought somebody else is going to say something, right? And Kitty was killed because nobody said something, right? So you have the bystander effect, and this also goes to kind of our multi-employer work site. I'm going to pull in a bunch of things here, right? Who is the one who's going to say something? Is it the GC? Is it the sub? Is it the sub of the sub? Is it the owner? Who has that hierarchy of who's going to step in first? And is anybody going to step in? Right?
Well, the catch-all response to that is safety's everybody's responsibility, right?
Right. And there's another thing that lives on paper, right? Safety's everybody's responsibility. But what really are, to your point, what really are our responsibilities? What have we defined to be something, and quite frankly, I'm going to say this because I have seen some places where stop work has been initiated, and many times people might call stop work, and we stop work, and the result would have been nothing would have happened anyway, right? So how do you define that? Like, do we tell people, okay, well, we're not going to stop work for things that may not happen. We have to be certain that something's going to happen. How do we put the confines around this?
Well, it goes back to, I think, this definition that often gets undefined, which is risk tolerance. What is our tolerance for risk? We know what the OSHA regulations are, right? Or at least we should. But sometimes there's gray areas in which work gets performed, where the risk tolerance for my organization is different than the risk tolerance for your organization. That's
well,
got to be
everybody needs to get together
factor.
then, right? On a multi-employer worksite, everybody needs to get together and figure out what that risk tolerance is for the project.
So, from my perspective, in really every time when I've worked with companies that have mature safety management systems, this issue of working with other contractors comes up. And some of these other contractors do not have mature safety management systems. And it's created this friction on the job site as to who we're following, why we're following certain rules, who's in charge. In every major incident that I have with this company that we run their entire safety department for the last 5 years, as long as we're working alone, we're aces. The minute we inject someone else in there, we're not. And we had a case involves this stop work authority situation, right? They get to the job situation. They're looking at a procedure. The procedure's not well defined. We do it one way. The other contractor does it another way. They're there in charge of the site, if you will. We're working to support their activities. We go along with their process, and we end up dropping a 30-foot piece of pipe on someone's head because of their process, right? Well, in the investigation, it comes back to this very issue, right? Which is, why did you not stop the job? Why did you go along with their process, which was different than our process? And the answer was, well, they're in charge. So it's a little more complex than just the psychological safety components of, I didn't feel comfortable speaking up.
Right. I didn't have the right feeling. Right. So here are another couple things that, I think kind of play into this. And one I call the commercial override. Okay. It's okay to stop work unless we're behind schedule.
Liquidated damages are real. I remember you reading that in the contract. In your article, and liquidated damages are a real thing.
Right. So, there's that. And then the other problem is the restart problem. Who has if everybody has the authority to stop work, who has the authority to restart it? And what is the process to get there?
This is the way we handle that from a process standpoint, right? So our policies are a little more prescriptive than you have the right and obligation to stop unsafe work anytime it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, you just don't know what to do, stop the job and go ask somebody, right? So when someone elects stop work authority, what happens next has got to be defined by the organization. So with organizations we consult with, we recommend it immediately gets escalated to supervision. Supervision is the only one that can restart the job. And they must document why the job was stopped and why they chose to restart it. Was there corrective action? Was there nothing? Somebody felt and your feeling was great, but it was misplaced. It's actually safe for us to go ahead and do that. But I don't see a lot of companies that have that maturity of it. That's why I'm like, everything doesn't need to be classified as stopping the job. Me and you having a personal interaction about putting on your hard hat is not an example of stopping the job per se. We're not stopping the job. I'm stopping you. That's one thing. But if we're going to stop the job, then we need to define who has the authority to restart it and under what circumstances that we did restart it so we can track it. And now we have a metric. Now we've got something we can go to. I don't know how companies you work with do it.
Same thing, right? Somebody is assigned, and usually supervision, the superintendent, or a committee of people that get together. Maybe it's somebody from each of the trades plus, and there's kind of a meeting of the minds, right? And that's part of the process. And it does have to be documented why it was restarted and what corrective actions were put in place, if any, right? Because as you said, sometimes people just have a feeling. So I guess the next question is, you have this stop work program. You've got everything that we said, put in place. You have protections from, being retaliated against. You have protections for, not feeling bad because there might be a schedule break. You have designated the restart, like who's going to be in charge of the restart, right? We know that, we're going to try to get rid of some of those social things that stop us from reporting altogether or, waiting for somebody else to do it. What can somebody ask themselves to see if they just have that program on paper, if it's really working, or if there's a problem, right? And I have a few of these. Let me throw them on you, right? 3 questions a safety manager can run to audit whether or not their stop work authority program is a real thing. Okay. Name the last stop that cost real money. Not the last stop, the last expensive one. If nobody can name one, you do not have stop work authority. You have a slogan. What do you think about that?
100%. 100%. And look, our assessments that we do for Veriforce and other clients support that. You go and say, all right, show me your stop work policy. Got it. Show me your stop work training. Got it. Show me the last time the last time somebody exercised stop work authority and how you track that to closure. Okay, well, maybe not the last one. Show me where you did it in the last 5 years.
You get something from like 2010, right? We have a story from 2010 when there was stop work, but there was no quantification of what actually the stop work was, how much it cost the company, and was the cost weighed against what could have happened had the stop work and the corrective action not been put in place, right? So I contend that if you don't have one, then you just have a slogan and nobody's really implementing this, okay? The second one, okay, who authorized the restart and were they the person under the schedule, under schedule pressure? Okay. If yes, fix that before touching anything else. Restart authority is the whole program. Why is the restart authority the whole program?
Because we're going to determine whether or not that risk that justified that stop still exists or not. Do we have the right controls in place? Now we've been aware of it. Management knowledge, known or should have known, is part of what OSHA has to prove when they're looking at issuing citations.
Amen.
Lack of management knowledge is a affirmative defense. Now, just because you didn't know, if you should have known, that's not an affirmative defense. But if we have lack of knowledge, now you've got knowledge, right? They have stopped the job. They have alerted somebody in supervision that you've designated by policy that there was an issue. We're going to restart. What happened with that person's justification? What was the action?
Right.
And I think this is where you get into some components of the psychological safety side, which is you can destroy this program on how you react to this. Now, not every time somebody stops a job are they justified in stopping the job.
Correct.
Right? When
I would
they
say
may have
correct.
thought their concern was correct. This is a critical lift. We need a critical lift plan. You come out, no, it's not a critical lift. We don't need a critical lift plan for this. This is why I'm going to go ahead and restart the job. Okay? They had a concern. We addressed the concern. We gave them feedback. If we don't have positive feedback and reinforcing people to exercise this stop working Thursday, they'll never do it again.
Right. So this is why I said, when you said, well, a lot of times the supervision or the superintendent is the person who can restart the job, right? And this is kind of why I suggested that there should be more than one party that gets together and looks at this, because, I think there's a tendency, and if there is this tendency for people who are under the schedule pressure, which is a superintendent or a foreman, right, to get her done, that they may restart the job prematurely and not take that stop work to a natural conclusion, right? And give you, a reason why it was restarted if there wasn't any corrective action, or what the corrective action was if it was restarted. And so, again, that's a failure if people are just restarting the job and not listening to all of the factors that surrounded why this person stopped work in the first place. So the third thing, right? And this is very telling, because I've seen this in a lot of construction companies. Where is the person working now that stopped work? Okay. Retaliation is essentially never overt. Okay. It's the crew composition next rotation. Is that guy taken off the job? Is he moved? Is he kind of, we need you somewhere else kind of thing, right? If people who stopped work the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, if they're not on the job anymore, then we have a problem.
100%. 100%. And I also add on to this, if we're having to stop work that much, then we're not fulfilling my pet peeve, which is hazards are best controlled in the design and planning of the work. If we're getting to the work and we're having to stop the job, the whole job site, this activity, because of some uncontrolled hazard, then we didn't do a good job in planning. And so again, that's a systems issue. But who takes the brunt of the systems issue? Usually the people that are pointing out the problems with the system. And who's most defensive of the system? The people who designed it.
That's right. That's right. We didn't make a mistake. You made a mistake. You didn't implement it the way that it was, work is as imagined versus work is done. Right.
But
so,
you got a good thing in here for hiring clients, and I want to call it out.
okay.
If you're a hiring client, ask your contractors to track the people who stopped work over the last 6 months, over the last 12 months, and see if they're still with the organization. Now, you can't draw conclusions. A correlation is not causation, but you can look at patterns. And you can certainly ask questions and ask for reasonable explanations as to why you have such turnover with people who actually exercise their stop working authority.
Yeah. So let me give this to you, James. So you talked about the threshold, right? Because I think that's kind of where a lot of stop work authority stuff falls apart, is in that threshold. And you talked about having a risk-based threshold. How do we communicate that to our workers? How do we choose a threshold? I mean, it's one thing to say as management that we have a risk tolerance, right? We have we've looked at these things, but how do we communicate that to the line worker who's the one that actually will pull the trigger and speak up?
I think this is a real complex answer because we don't want to track the routine things that happen throughout the day. Meaning, at least I don't. Doc, put on your hard hat. You forgot your hard hat in the truck. It's just clutter in the data, right? So I think you probably begin by creating a situation where if it's handled between two people and it's really of a personal nature related to PPE compliance and things of that nature, then we don't necessarily have to stop the entire job. But if it's got SIF potential, right? Then that's something that we need to be tracking. If it affects more than one person, that's something we need to be tracking. Definitely, if it affects other contractors that are involved, and I've got to get their management team involved into this too, because they're either affecting my work or I'm affecting their work, and something's happening that's causing, risk. So really, I hate to use your phrase, it just depends. There's not a one size fits all answer to this, but depending on what you're doing and depending on the risk of the activities on that job site, it may vary. But from James's perspective, I just don't want my desk cluttered up with a bunch of PPE things that I can fix that you're fixing, right? We need to track things like in our example earlier, where we had our rip from the headlines. You have H2S known on this location. You got problems with pipe labeling. You had problems with respiratory protection. You had problems with the HASCOM program. You had problems with training. You had systematic issues that somebody should have raised those issues before we went into this shutdown and exposed contractors to it. Rather than just saying, we hired them to do the job. We know we have these issues, but they'll figure it out. We're going to pass on this liability contraction, which is pretty much what happened, honestly, right? So to answer your question, it's a complex answer, but I think for me, it begins with sorting through where we want to bring management's attention to it.
Okay. I think sorting through where we want to bring the workers' attention to it, right? And you've done that. I mean, you said it's complex, but really you put some boundaries on, listen, everybody has stop work authority. And here are some examples of when we expect out, when it affects more than one person, when it affects more than one trade, when it has potential to seriously injure or kill somebody, right? I mean, that gives me more of a mind for what's going on. And then by the job, you can actually pinpoint things further. We know we have H2S problems. We have H2S monitors. If the H2S monitor gets to this, we need to stop work. If we have, so you can put the boundaries on based on what you're doing that day. Now, is it a perfect system? No, it's not a perfect system, right? But it takes it from everybody has stop work authority on the paper and coming from the mouth to something that's actually a little bit more tangible to somebody who has to make a judgment call.
And I think defining it more narrowly defining it addresses this concern that we have with BBS in the RAC card system. I'm supposed to write down on a card, Dr. Martin did not have on her safety glasses, reminded Dr. Martin to put safety glasses on and turn it in. We filled up the whole system with that kind of stuff. And we left out, 4 workers walked under suspended load. We did a critical lift with no critical lift plan. We're down in excavations. We don't have a trench box set up. We made a classification of soil as type A soil.
We got a ton of safety observations.
Agreed. The big stuff
Agreed.
flies right by us.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you wanted to add to that, James? I think we kind of covered that.
I think really this is something good to talk about. Moving from paper safety. Paper safety is not real safety, but you and I both know this. If you don't have paper, you don't have documentation. Okay? You got a new book out. The Record Decides. I was honored to write the foreword to that book.
Thanks for doing that.
The Record Decides. If you can't prove it, it did not happen. Okay? So we have to have documentation. But moving beyond the documentation, moving beyond the pre-qualification, is where this documentation comes to life. I like to think we write really good policies and procedures at Mariner Gulf, and we write an outstanding stop work authority program. But you have to implement it. It's just a roadmap to safe work.
It's got to
And
rise up off the page.
If we're always talking about leading and lagging indicators, hey, here's a leading indicator. If you're not tracking, you should be tracking. And if your stop work authority exercise is 0, you got a problem. And I'm going to end with this for me and what you said at the very beginning, right? Which is, let me find it here. It's not you don't have a program, you have a slogan.
That's right.
You have a slogan.
It's got to dance up off the page and be put into practice. And I think that's
100%.
with it for every policy that you have in a safety program. So James,
100%.
how do you feel after episode 150? Can you do a few more?
Man, I can do another 150.
There you go. Me too.
Great. Thank you, Bear Force, for powering this. Without Bear Force and their commitment to the podcast, to helping bring information to practicing safety professionals and executives that really want to bring workers home safe from high hazard jobs. If we didn't have their backing, we wouldn't have the resources to come out here and do this every week. So we appreciate Bear Force's partnership in that. That's really forward thinking. Our producer, Amanda, is amazing. America's treasure, Amanda. Thank you for what you do. And thank you most of all to our listeners. We do this for you. And we really appreciate when we get comments, when we get messages through LinkedIn, when somebody goes on our LinkedIn page over on the Risk Matrix podcast and either has a question or chimes in. Hey, I even look for, makes me happy for somebody to give us that old thumbs up, seal of approval, right? Or hits that subscribe button like your mama wants you to do. So we do it for you, and your feedback helps fuel us each week to continue doing what we're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
All right. And thanks again for listening to our 150th episode. And if you haven't heard, football season is coming. So roll tide,
baby.